West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire.
Joining me now, one of the co-authors of this study, Nina Wang. She's a policy associate at the Center on Privacy and Technology at Georgetown Law. And, of course, Frank Figliuzzi, MSNBC national security analyst and former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI. I can't think of a better panel to have this discussion with. Nancy, I want to kick it off with you. ICE has evolved really into a domestic surveillance agency. I mean, as we said, they're skirting privacy laws, amassing this trove of information on hundreds of thousands of Americans and immigrants. What exactly are they doing with this data?
Yeah, so our 2-year investigation on ICE surveillance has essentially found that ICE is effectively operating as a domestic surveillance agency. If you've ever had your picture taken at the DMV, you may be among the 1 in 3 people in America whose photo was searched by ICE using face recognition technology. If you've ever driven your car past a toll booth or in a public parking lot, you may be among the 3 in 4 people in America whose license plate ICE has captured using high-speed cameras, along with the time, date, and location of where your vehicle has been seen. If you have a monthly utility bill, including from major providers like Verizon and AT&T, you may have been among the 3 in 4 people in America whose address ended up in the hands of ICE every single time you paid your bill. And as you've mentioned, ICE can do all of this without needing a warrant. And because these surveillance capacities are so secretive and create massive side doors around existing privacy protections, it's actually extremely opaque to understand what exactly they do with this information. Our research has found that they have access to this huge amounts of information, but what they actually do with it, how they use it in investigations, all of that is still extremely secretive.
Is extremely sensitive, like you said, but also extremely frightening. Frank, ICE has spent $2.8 billion. That was between 2008 and 2021 on surveillance data. Anyone's information can end up in their hands. Based on Nina's report, I'm curious, how is any of this legal?
It's questionable, and we need inquiries now. We need congressional oversight now, and that response you just read from Immigration and Customs Enforcement is clearly inadequate to certainly assuage any of our concerns. Look, this is an eye-opening report, Tiffany. Who knew, right? I mean, if you had to ask the average American, which government agency do you think had the greatest capacity to overreach and abuse its powers and authority, you might have heard answers like the NSA, the CIA, the FBI. Well, it turns out it's none of those. It's Immigration and Customs Enforcement. And most people might think, confusingly so, well, maybe that's a jurisdiction around the border. I don't really live near the border. It's not an issue for me. No, that's Border Patrol. We're talking about ICE. This is a national remit. with a national program that seems to have turned into domestic surveillance of all of us, and we need answers. You know, most Americans have become keenly aware over the years of the commercial sale of our data, right? You know, you look up new sneakers on Google, and you suddenly get ads on Facebook for new sneakers.
Right,
and people scratch their heads and go, boy, that's kind of strange. No, this is way beyond that, Tiffany. This is your U.S. government buying data on you from DMVs at the state level, utility companies at the local level. They're searching through facial recognition of your driver's license photos. They know where you drive because of toll booth data that they're either buying or acquiring outright in a gift from those jurisdictions. And when states say, we're trying to plant the flag, we're trying to stop you from doing this, don't do this anymore, you know what they do? This report says they do an end around that law in that state, and they go buy the data somewhere else. So this is a revelation to me after 25 years in law enforcement. We need answers. It smells a lot like the abuses we uncovered after the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
You'll remember concerns with the FBI storing metadata of your phone records. Well, all that was just the numbers dialed, incoming numbers dialed, outgoing numbers, and anonymity. They'd get a search warrant later if they needed to figure it out. None of that's happening here. It's far worse.
Yeah, and you know, this, like you said, the Patriot Act, this all came about after 9/11, where people were frightened and were all too willing to give up their civil liberties. I have to say it's not so surprising. I also remember things like COINTELPRO, and in more recent times, agencies tracking Black Lives Matter activists. So it's sad. But, Nina, one thing that you pointed out that Frank talked about is this data sharing, and Equifax was one of the people who was buying and selling data, which is quite frightening. Tell us about their role in this.
Yeah, so Equifax has played a central role in how ICE has been able to buy up people's utility records. So Equifax has basically organized a group of utility companies and asked these companies to send in their customer data for mostly credit reporting purposes. However, Equifax has turned around and sold that trove of data to another company called Thomson Reuters, which sells these person search databases to ICE. So through this long chain of various different entities, ICE has been able to buy the utility records of multiple individual utility companies, actually without most of them knowing, and certainly without the knowledge of the actual consumers.
Which is so frightening. Frank, I'm thinking about the reason why this is happening. This is ICE, their intention was to go after undocumented immigrants, I believe. But you think about the Ukrainians, right? And imagine it was acceptable to do this when people were coming from Central America. Imagine targeting Ukrainians coming over here, and ICE using this data for them. I feel like America would have more sympathy and empathy there. So it's, very unfortunate. We have about 10 seconds left. What should lawmakers be doing to stop this this kind of privacy invasion?
At a congressional level, we need oversight hearings right now in the Senate and the House. At the state level, legislators need to ask a very simple question of the federal government. Are you acquiring data from our various companies and DMVs and all of that? Are you doing it? How are you doing it? Stop it now. And those are the questions that need to be asked, because this is actually undermining our safety. Undocumented people aren't going to apply for driver's licenses. They aren't going to take a road test, a driver's test. They're going to be less safe. We won't be able to track them if we get in an accident with them. They're not going to apply for utilities. They're not going to have heat and electricity. This needs to get fixed quickly.
It is Monday, the 16th of May of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English Bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, because on Mondays it comes after the weekend. And in the days of yore, what was left over from the weekend, one made into a lovely gourmet dish on Mondays. And you put it on a blue plate to show how special it is. And here we are. That's right. It's so special. We've had another bunch of mass killings, mass shootings here in the United States of America. Seems normal again, doesn't it? Is the pandemic really over? We have a story coming up that puts the lie to that. Anyway, this kid, and I guess we'll call him a kid since he's 18, you know, apparently he didn't hulk up because the cops that came to lead him away didn't kill him on the spot. Didn't shoot him in the back. Didn't put a knee to his throat. Let him out in handcuffs. Apparently someone talked him down when he had the rifle to his chin, apparently. I don't know. So, but look, we need a trial, right? So that the guy can plead that he's insane. He's already sought medical help. And the cops let us know that right off the top. That's how you can tell. Yeah, the guy was a white nationalist. Picked out black people specifically to kill. And I think there's a large segment of America that says that's not a hate crime. That's just business as usual. Yeah, well, I think maybe we should take this replacement theory and not make it a theory anymore and just put it into practice. And why don't we just do it? They have their gated communities. All we have to do is lock them in. They got their little strip malls. They've got their little fountain feature in the middle of their fake lake. And even marina slips for their little tiny little sailboats. And rowboats. Dinghies. Dinghy sailboats. Or maybe it's those little paddle crafts that you can sit two abreast. Paddle, paddle, paddle. They even got Botox clinics in the little strip malls. They'd be well taken care of. And they'd probably be happy. As creepy as the Teletubbies were, they never brainwash kids to go out and, I don't know, become Nazis and kill people in stores. Should we blame the parents? I mean, this kid, I call him a kid, because he's, 18, 19? You'll notice that this guy wasn't deemed to have hulked up when the other cops came to take him away. All right, he even got talked down from, offing himself. That's good. I mean, come on. But it's just another sort of how things are different. I mean, he wasn't shot in the back by accident thinking it was a taser. Oh, I just shot him with, a big old Magnum 44. Thought it was my taser. Didn't get a knee to the throat, I guess because he was wearing body armor that was so impenetrable that the retired cop who was working as a security guard so he could supplement his retirement. I thought these guys made good retirement. Apparently not. Guy had to work at a store as a security guard. I don't know. Maybe he just wanted to get out. Who knows? Regardless, he couldn't take the perp down. Yep. And what I love is that this kid who didn't hulk up, who wasn't shot in the back with a police service revolver, thinking it was a taser, no knee to the throat, none of the usual. I mean, even didn't have to announce that I have a gun. And they just automatically said, okay, well, you must have it illegally. Oh, that's his gun. We can't do anything about it. This kid had already been talked to for making terrorist threats. And his parents gave him a gun, ammo, and body armor for Christmas? Jeez. I always gave books, especially from the banned list. In the hopes that, I don't know, my kid, my nieces and nephews, my grandnieces and nephews, my grandkids might, have a mass reading event at school or maybe even the mall. Don't even have to call the cops. But, in certain states they probably would. And apparently it's all by design, and we know why. Part of, I don't know, taking over a country is making sure there's conflict so somebody can come to the rescue. I've explained before how the Western movement became the Western movement. How did we get across this great expanse of this continent? Simple. Send a bunch of settlers out into other people's property. Rile up the area. While at the same time, the indigenous people that are there, you gotta have a few advanced scouts like trappers, whatever, Here, have some whiskey. Have some guns. Then send those settlers in there and rile up the area. Have some sort of conflict. Then you got to go out there and build a fort. Don't you? And that's how we leapfrogged across this continent. Come to the rescue. Build a fort. Send more settlers out on the frontier. Rile up the area. Give everybody the means to be able to take matters into their own hands. And when they do, you come to the rescue. Bugle a-blazing. Bugle a-blaring. Yeah, let's get our metaphors right. Build a fort. Rinse and repeat. From sea to shining white nationalist foamy sea. Replacement. Yeah, they're right. Nazis need to be replaced. This is what happens when you don't punch the Nazis. Then we have to do something even more drastic. We have to take them, I don't know, separate them somehow from society. They certainly should not be running for government. If their stated aim is to destroy the United States of America, they have violated the oath to the Constitution of the United States. And they can't co-opt the Constitution of the United States like they have the American flag. Like it's their own. They represent everything the opposite of what those 3 colors and those 50 stars represent. They can have their Dixie swastika, all right? They just can't sell it at any more state fairs, county fairs, city parades, town and village little gatherings. No more Dixie swastikas sold anywhere. How about that for a start? Then we might as well just take the whole Nazi flag and say, you can't have that. And if you do, I guess maybe we might have to dig a little bit deeper into your background, won't we? If they can do it to 80-year-old Quakers, we can do it to a bunch of brown shirt Trumpenjungen Nazis. Pedo grifters. How low are these people going to go? A lot lower than we expect. A lot lower than we're even capable of understanding until it happens. Oh, yeah, we might foresee it. But deep down, we never really believe anybody's going to actually do it until they do. Don't pull the ball away from me, Lucy, not this time. Oh, I won't, Charlie. Come on, kick it. Splat. Okay. What's on the menu here? I guess we've gotten rid of the 2-panel or strip panel cartoon part of the introduction here. You always got to end up on peanuts. I did meet Charles Schultz back in the day. He lived in Santa Rosa. Best friend's brother was county supervisor at the time, so he knew a few people. Yeah, good guy. Charles. And my best friend's brother's a good guy too, but Okay, on the rest of the menu, yes, at the top, an investigation by the Georgetown Law Center has reported that ICE can spy on the majority of adult Americans, and they do. 3 out of 4. Yikes. I told everybody, look, you put these cameras on every corner. You got like cell phones that ping everywhere you go. I think they can pretty much track more than your buying habits. On the rest of the menu, the Labor Department ordered a restaurant in South Carolina to pay more than $600,000 to nearly 100 workers who were forced to share their tips. And they thought they could get away with paying them less than minimum wage. All right. You know that old dodge. It was illegal then, and it's illegal now. The Detroit 3 automakers reinstated their mask mandate at some Michigan facilities. You know why. Yeah. COVID spikes. And Atlanta is submitting a formal bid to host the 2024 Democratic National Convention. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where India banned exports of wheat amid its own food security concerns. And in a historic shift, the ruling parties of Finland and Sweden agreed to join NATO. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link, across the page near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. And yes, we need money, and if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, it would help so much. If you could afford to maybe send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, for instance, if you could send those funds to us once a month, it would really help. And I know it's tough for everybody out there, so when you can, please, and I mean that sincerely, and sincerely also thank you to those of you who have been so generous in helping us out these many years. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. Get that linked up on Twitter and other social media platforms, and you know who they are. Oh, just as an ancillary, you got to be a little careful sometimes when engaging with blue checks, because I'll just name names because I made a bad mistake apparently, and that was like telling a bad joke, as if any of my jokes would be anything but bad. And I had to remind myself and a few followers over the weekend too that I was told by a former lover and still dear friend, by the way, that what I do, like when I was trying to do stand-up, like what I do and like what I'm writing couldn't really be considered jokes because jokes by their nature are funny. And whatever it was I was doing, it wasn't funny. Well, tough love sometimes. And it was like a light went off. I went, oh, wow. But anyway, I engaged with the volatile mermaid who had made a salient observation that, for once, she'd like to see the people who, I call him the white buffalo terrorist. You know what I did there? See what I did there? The white buffalo terrorist? That's what I call him, and he will always remain that to me. Anyway, she was saying that when they interview the white buffalo terrorist neighbors and friends, for once she'd like to hear them say something other than like, he was such a quiet boy, so he's like really a good kid, went to church, all this stuff, instead of like he was a freaking piece of shit. And so I just made the stupid observation from a joke that I've said many times before. And that is that people tend not to finish their sentences when they say, oh, he was such a good boy. to me, that's not a complete sentence. What the complete sentence is in those instances with those types of people is that he was such a good boy and we had just no idea that he would act out on everything that we believe in. Shocked, I say, shocked. And the volatile mermaid didn't get the joke, but that's okay. And I explained the joke, like I'm just saying that the neighbors, are pieces of shit because they won't call the kid a piece of shit, probably because the neighbors are pieces of shit to begin with. But once you have to explain the joke, it is a fail. So the volatile mermaid was correct. And I got to say, her loyal followers, quite a few of them, let me know. You can't explain it. It's just like it is what it is. And it was a bad joke, I guess. But if someone doesn't get the joke, what are you going to do? Well, you might explain it, and then therefore it's no longer a joke because whatever it was that you did was not funny. So I'm sorry, volatile mermaid. I was actually agreeing with you. All right. Okay. Enough of that. If you would like to follow the show on Twitter, do so at Cookbook West. And, of course, please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found. And you can get the Deep State archive of Netroots Radio. The library is accessible at the Internet Archive at archive.org. Okay, Monday. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by the staff at the Associated Press. A restaurant in South Carolina has been ordered to pay more than $600,000 to nearly 100 workers who were forced to share their tips. The U.S. Department of Labor has ruled the tip pool at 167 Raw in Charleston was an illegal arrangement that violated the minimum wage laws, the federal agency said in documents obtained by the Post and Courier of Charleston. The restaurant owners claimed a credit that let them pay tip workers. Get this. I haven't seen this wage since, the 80s. $2.13 an hour. Maybe even the 70s. With the understanding that the pool tips would bring everyone's pay up to at least the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Wow. But taking tips from waiters made the tip credit invalid, and the restaurant was required to pay the higher rate, the Labor Department ruled. And you know why? Because waiters and waitresses and bartenders are taxed on their tips, no matter how much they share. Okay. The agency said 92 workers will share in total $624,000.17. They're going to have to make a fraction of a cent to make that equal, apparently. The restaurant owner said lawyers said the tip pool was legal before it started, but the Labor Department, quote, determined that while we had not intentionally violated any regulation, we had instead relied upon incorrect legal advice. Well, that's the one way of getting out of it. And that was 167 Raw owner Jesse Sandel said in a statement to the newspaper. Now, to be fair, the restaurant cooperated with the investigation and is now complying with the federal law. Well, I may be going out on a limb, but this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fabulous River City Hash Mondays is by David Shepardson from Reuters. General Motors, Ford Motor Company, and Chrysler parent Stellantis said yesterday, Sunday, they are reinstating a requirement that employees wear masks in southeastern Michigan, where there are high levels of COVID-19. The Detroit 3 automakers said in early March they would allow auto workers to stop wearing masks at workplaces where U.S. health officials said it was safe to do so. This month, the automakers said they would adopt revised guidance by the CDC, allowing workers at U.S. facilities to not wear masks, regardless of COVID-19 vaccination status, if those facilities were not in high-risk counties. The masking guidelines issued in February shifted from a focus on the rate of COVID-19 transmission to monitoring local hospitalizations, hospital capacity, and infection rates. 6 counties in southeastern Michigan, including Wayne, Oakland, Macomb, and Washtenaw, are again listed by the CDC as having high COVID-19 levels. The CDC recommends wearing masks indoors in public settings in those counties. Ford said it was temporarily reinstating a face mask requirement at all of its plants located in areas deemed high risk by the CDC. Stellantis said that starting today, Monday, company-issued face masks will again be required for employees, contractors, and visitors at all Stellantis facilities in those Michigan counties. The company added, it is expected that the requirement will be in place for the next 2 weeks. GM said it will be implementing COVID protection measures at our facilities in Oakland, Wayne, Livingston, and Macomb, given the CDC has now listed them as high risk. The UAW said yesterday, Sunday, if a facility is located in high-risk counties, as identified by the CDC, they will require masking and physical distancing. GM and Ford both have their headquarters in Wayne County, while Stellantis' North American headquarters is in Oakland County, while all three have numerous factories in southeastern Michigan. The CDC says 4.25% of U.S. counties are currently listed as having high levels of COVID-19. The Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Atlanta is submitting a formal bid to host the 2024 Democratic National Convention. Mayor Andre Dickens announced on Friday to Democrats holding their annual state party dinner. It could be another step toward the center of American politics for Georgia after Democrats stunned Republicans by delivering Georgia's electoral votes to President Joe Biden in 2020 and electing Warnock and Ossoff to give Democrats control of the Senate. Warnock's bid for re-election and Democrat Stacey Abrams, I think it's Democratic Stacey Abrams' second run for governor are already among the highest profile races of the 2022 election cycle. In addition, Georgia is one of more than a dozen states where state Democrats have asked to step to the front of the party's presidential nominating calendar, displacing the traditional position held by the Iowa caucuses. Georgia's swing state status could aid its bid for the convention, with national parties sometimes hoping to use their gathering as a showcase to appeal to the voters of the host state. Atlanta has hosted only one previous presidential nominating convention. The July 1988 Democratic gathering that nominated Massachusetts Governor Michael Tank Dukakis for president and Texas Senator Lloyd Bentsen. I was friends with JFK, Mr. Quayle, and you are no JFK, for vice president. Now, of course, we know that Dukakis lost that election to George Bush the Senior. That event was held in the now demolished Omni Arena downtown. The Democrats began their search process last year by inquiring about the interest of 20 locations and have narrowed it down to a list of 8 cities. Others that have been publicly named include Chicago and Houston. Now, Republicans are deciding between Milwaukee and Nashville, Tennessee for their convention site. The gatherings fill hotels with thousands of visitors, but also bring a heavy security presence. Yeah, mostly just the Democratic ones, like in Chicago. All right, let's get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, so much of so little to say. First thing I want to say about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is I want to see it again. It was such a ride and was so much I don't know that I can say anything interesting after just one viewing. That said, second, although you don't need any of these things to watch Multiverse of Madness, if you've watched the Marvel movies and the TV shows and know the comics, then this Marvel film, more than others, really rewards your knowledge. Third, it's been a while since I've been so pleasantly misdirected by trailers. I thought I knew who the villain was going to be, and it turns out I was wrong. And in a way, it turns out I was right. But speaking of villains, where Marvel movies have really excelled with their villains, this movie is a refreshing change from the mass murderers with sympathetic motives, the villain formula they have worked so well. Fourth is that Sam Raimi has managed to make both a heck of a Marvel film and a Sam Raimi movie. There are just little moments like when the second monster dies in a particularly gory way. I thought, oh, there you are, Sam Raimi. Also, in a self-referential director cameo via motif kind of way, look for how many standout moments, whether plot points or comic relief, revolve around hands, or specifically touch. Fifth, when Doctor Strange came out, I feared that movie version Doctor Strange wouldn't capture the trippiness of co-creator Steve Ditko's worlds. Turns out, didn't need to fear that. Sixth, love Benedict Wong as Wong, and I love Wong as Sorcerer Supreme. Y Social Gomez como America Chavez? Sí. Seventh, what was up with all the male characters' hair? Eighth, I was pleased to see Multiverse of Madness complete an arc for Doctor Strange's character that started in Doctor Strange and continued through Spider-Man No Way Home. Ninth, on top of all that, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness has something very valuable and very Marvel-like to say, that, in wake of tragedy, if we don't process and move on, but instead wallow in our grief or regret or envy or hubris, we can become not just villains, but monsters. Finally, I still want to see it again. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Tulika Bose. Today, supermassive news from space. The first image of the supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way, Sagittarius A star, was just released by astronomers this morning. I'm here talking to Seth Fletcher, our chief features editor for Scientific American. He literally wrote a book on the Event Horizon Telescope and is our resident expert on all things black holes. So Seth, what does it actually take to photograph a black hole?
So, as you know, black holes are technically unseeable. They trap everything that falls inside, including light. Anything that passes through the event horizon, which is the boundary, is trapped there forever. It can just never escape. But supermassive black holes like Sagittarius A star are surrounded by glowing, obliterated matter that's orbiting the black hole. Some of it's falling in, some of it just forms this disk around it. And that stuff glows, and the black hole, because of the way it warps space-time around it, because of the incredible force of gravity, it casts a shadow against that glowing matter. And so that's actually what we see in this picture.
So we know that astronomers captured this image with a worldwide network of radio observatories called the Event Horizon Telescope, or the EHT. That's what you wrote a book about. Can you tell me a little bit about this?
People figured out a few decades ago that you could collect a certain wavelength of radio light in microwaves, and if you could do it with a radio telescope the size of the Earth, you would be able to resolve something as small to us as the black hole at the center of the Milky Way, or at least what people thought was there. An amazing thing about radio astronomy is that there's a technique called interferometry that lets you combine multiple dishes that are very far apart into a single effective virtual telescope.
It's the biggest high-resolution technique in all of astronomy. What does it actually mean, Seth?
There's only a very limited period of time each year when telescopes in Europe, North America, South America, Antarctica can all see the same things in the sky. So they put together these elaborate schedule of when Sagittarius A star, for example, is going to be up over the horizon and visible to what telescopes. They just scan black holes for several nights. Then they take all the data in the hard drives, then they physically ship it to 2 supercomputer banks, one in Massachusetts, one in Germany, and then they correlate it all into a single data set, and then they search it for common detections where all of the telescopes have seen the same thing.
And why is this such a big deal?
This is only the second black hole we've ever seen directly, but it's much cooler than that. This is sort of our own private supermassive black hole. This is at the very center of the Milky Way galaxy. It's the solution to a mystery that people have been trying to solve for a really long time. Now that we get to see it, we get to see it change. We get to watch it in the future, and that could make possible all kinds of interesting science about gravity, space-time, black holes, galaxy formation. Who knows what people are going to be able to cook up.
The astronomers also say that in the future, as they add more observatories to the EHT, they'll even be able to make movies of Sagittarius A star. I guess that would look like videos of matter circling the drain before falling into an abyss. For 60 Second Science, I'm Tulika Bose.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Heart disease and stroke can be catastrophic. They're leading causes of death, disability, and healthcare spending in the U.S., yet they're largely preventable. Alarmingly, heart disease and stroke are taking a toll on middle-aged adults 35 to 64, with over 800,000 deaths and hospitalizations in 2016. Million Hearts is a national initiative focused on preventing 1 million heart attacks, strokes, and other cardiovascular events by 2022. Coordinated actions by Million Hearts partners in communities, healthcare, and public health will keep people healthy, optimize care, and improve outcomes in populations at risk. Everyone has a part to play. Focus on the ABCs of heart health. A. Aspirin use when appropriate. B. Blood pressure control. C. Cholesterol management. And S. Smoking cessation. To learn more, visit cdc.gov/vital signs.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Mitch McConnell, the sour old goose who heads the Senate Republican caucus, had a hissy fit when the news leaked out that American women are about to have their most fundamental constitutional right taken from them by a cabal of Supreme Court judges. What made Mitch twitch, of course, was not the bad news for women, but the leak. He huffed that revealing the right-wing court's scheme to the public was a stunning breach, spewing that it's an attack on the independence of the Supreme Court. Mitch, the so-called Supremes have been meeting behind closed doors specifically to plot an all-out attack on the independence of some 170 million women to control their own bodies. Why aren't you opposing the secrecy rather than supporting the court's subversion of women's liberty? Perversely, the entire Republican leadership is outraged by the leak rather than the attack on women. Right-wing blowhard Ted Cruz, for example, yapped that informing the public, quote, will do lasting damage to the integrity of the court. Ted, you and your ideological ilk annihilated the court's integrity and its legitimacy when you stacked it with a covey of corporate-coddling partisan hacks like Alito, Barrett, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Thomas. Then came Senator Mike Lee of Utah, a Trump acolyte, ludicrously blathering that the leak of the judicial plan is despicable. Why? Well, he explained to us commoners, the court, quote, is not a political body. If ignorance is bliss, Mike must be ecstatic. The GOP majority on this court is so immersed in its own partisan biases that it is routinely ruling against workers, the environment, women, voting rights, local communities, and democracy itself. This is Jim Hightower saying, no surprise then that the public trust in the integrity of these arbiters of justice is crashing. If the court won't respect our democratic ideals, the people won't respect the court.
If you'd like more of Jim Hightower's real populism, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter gives you the real lowdown on which corporations, by name, are doing what to the middle class, our environment, and our democracy. Each month, the Hightower Lowdown brings you facts you didn't know, along with actions you can take to fight back. It also comes with a sense of humor. Hightower believes we can fight the gods and still have fun. Plus, get this, it's cheap. Only $15 brings you 12 issues a year. For real populism, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome to 60 Second Civics, the daily podcast of the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. On today's podcast, we begin a short series on George Washington, who was perhaps the most influential leader in the creation of the American nation. Through his achievements as Commander-in-Chief during the Revolution, in support of the drafting and ratification of the Constitution, and as first president, Washington was instrumental in transforming the ideals of the Revolution into reality. His career as soldier, revolutionary, constitution maker, and chief executive of a new nation demanded a range of skills and talents with few precedents in history. George Washington was born and grew up in rural Virginia, at a time when it was a royal colony with British traditions of government by aristocracy and an economy based on growing and exporting tobacco. His father's early death interrupted George's formal education. He became a professional surveyor in his late teens, but soon thereafter turned to military service as a way to realize his ambitions. That's all for today's podcast, 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
Here's a primer on some of the legal issues raised by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The law of war rests significantly on the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and the Charter of the United Nations, which is essentially a treaty among nations. The first purpose of the law of war is to prevent wars and the horrors of armed conflict. Genocide, crimes against humanity, violation of other laws of war, all are covered, as is the crime of aggression, one country invading another. The law of war validates the use of force for self-defense, which clearly applies to Ukraine. Interestingly, Russia seeks legal validity for its invasion by claiming that it's engaged in self-defense, preemptive self-defense. The second purpose of the law of war is to regulate how wars are fought after the first goal, prevention of war, fails to be realized. The law of war thus imposes obligations and restrictions intended to protect civilians, to differentiate civilians from combatants, to require the humane treatment of wounded soldiers, sailors, and prisoners of war, and to prevent atrocities. The law of war also makes rules for adjudicating these issues, although it's really difficult to hold responsible persons who commit war crimes. What Russia's invasion of Ukraine demonstrates is a failure of law, a failure often repeated, with consequences that are shocking and enraging, horrifying, and heartbreaking. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1979. That was the day that A. Philip Randolph, perhaps the most significant African-American figure in the U.S. labor movement, passed away. He was 90 years old. During World War I, Randolph and Chandler Owen founded the monthly magazine The Messenger in Harlem. From the pages of The Messenger, Randolph called for an end to employment discrimination against black workers. A few years later, sleeping car porters who worked on trains for the Pullman Car Company wanted to form a union. They knew they faced an uphill battle because the Pullman Company was notoriously anti-union. They reached out to A. Philip Randolph, inviting him to lead their effort. Since he did not work for the company, Randolph could not be fired for talking about the union. He accepted the job. It took 12 long years of struggle, but in 1937, the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters signed their first union contract. They became the first national black union of the American Federation of Labor. During World War II, Randolph organized a planned march on Washington, calling for an end to discrimination in defense industry employment. He called off the march when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt conceded and issued Executive Order 8802, prohibiting the defense industry from engaging in acts of discrimination. In 1963, Randolph helped to plan another march on Washington, D.C. This march he did not cancel. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom drew 250,000 civil rights supporters to the nation's capital. That day, Randolph shared the podium with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who delivered his famous I Have a Dream speech. A. Philip Randolph fought more than half a century for labor rights, for civil rights, and for dignity. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 52 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high in the low 70s. Cloudy skies early here and then followed by partial clearing in the afternoon. Winds will be out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And a few passing clouds overnight with lows in the mid-40s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. Sunshine tomorrow with clouds mixed, highs in the mid-70s. And winds will be light and variable. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon continue their trend of not giving us updates from Friday. But at the end of Friday, we did stand at, or I actually would be at the beginning of Friday, we stood and continue to stand at 434,063 confirmed cases, and our deceased remains at 533. The way things are going now, we may get an update on Wednesday. Let's hope it's sooner. Grass pollen is rated very high right outside the window in Rogue River proper. The air quality index is in the good range at 34 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is very high at level 8, so take extreme care. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.13 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 85%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 68 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 77 degrees and sunny. Rome is 80 and fair. Kyiv is 65 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 70 and partly cloudy.
Hong Kong is 70 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 60 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 62 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 55 and mostly cloudy. And New York is 72 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. First amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy River City Hash Mondays is by Jerry Shih and Neha Masih out of the Washington Post. After Russia invaded Ukraine in a conflict of two countries that together accounted for nearly a third of the world's wheat supply and sent food prices to record highs, India was supposed to step in to fill the void. Not anymore. The world's second-largest wheat producer banned exports of the grain amid its own food security concerns, potentially exacerbating the steep rise in global food prices that is affecting billions of people and threatening food security around the world. In a Commerce Ministry order, Indian officials said they made the decision after considering India's own needs and those of neighboring countries. India's food security was at risk because of surging international prices, the ministry said. The announcement was an abrupt reversal weeks after Indian officials and international analysts talked up the possibility of India's significantly ratcheting up exports to fill the gap created partly by the war in Ukraine. International food prices have soared to record highs in recent months, putting pressure on billions of people, particularly the world's poorest. Officials at the United Nations have warned.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
John Hudson, Loveday Morris, Victoria Bissett, and Miriam Berger of the Washington Post bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Sweden's ruling party dropped the country's historic military non-alignment yesterday Sunday and agreed to join NATO shortly after Finland's leaders officially announced they would do the same. The moves were major steps in ending decades of military neutrality for the two Nordic nations as Russia's invasion of Ukraine continued to dramatically shift security considerations in Europe. Speaking at a news conference earlier in Helsinki along Prime Minister Sanna Marin, Finnish President Sauli Niinisto described Sunday as a historic day. The decision still needs to be ratified by the parliaments of both countries, but that is considered largely a formality. Once formal requests are submitted, each of NATO's 30 member nations must approve, a process that could take months or longer. Well, already we're hearing some rattling from Turkey and Erdogan. Maybe he doesn't want Finland and Sweden to be part of NATO. Well, there's still some more arm twisting to be had. And I guess we might have to twist Erdogan a little bit, won't we? Yes, we will. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Tarrytown Chowder Tuesdays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.